Thank you. Dear friends, in this brief talk I have 3 points. Our chairman of the party, Alex Stubb, now Prime Minister for a few more days, still opens every speech with 3 points. So we have to follow his example. I have 3 points. 2 are about regulation, and the last one about future of European Union from this point of view. I am a historian by profession, and that means that historians are very skeptical and wary about theories and utopians. We try to speak about experience, facta, the past, and I take my examples from my own research, all 3. After all, I think that the core idea of conservative thinking is to solve practical problems, not to build utopias, but that's another story. My first point is a pragmatic problem. The biggest social problem in Finland is alcohol-related deaths, sicknesses, loss of life and material. We have tried to treat that problem with regulation and deregulation. Here I have a picture with the most dramatic change in the late 60s, the deregulation of the distribution of alcohol. The prediction was that the consumption, overall consumption, will rise 15% at most and then settle down. That was not the case. It was 5-fold consumption, and all alcohol-related problems are directly linked to the total consumption. That was total misunderstanding and misconception what deregulation brings about. Now we have another problem with regulation. In Estonia, alcohol is free and cheap, and inside European Union the borders are open. Which is more important, the social problem of alcohol in Finland or the no borders principle of European Union? The main argument against re-regulating the distribution of alcohol is that in that case all Finnish people travel to Tallinn and bring the alcohol from there. I think this is a real problem. We have to find a real solution inside European Union, and I am personally I'm for the re-regulation. This picture shows that beer available everywhere in Finland is absolutely the biggest alcohol drink, not the strong drinks. My second point is from totally different area. The ongoing digital revolution, third industrial revolution, which is ongoing. I've written several books about this and tried to understand what is the core. It started with a double D, deregulation and digitalization. Digitalization is entirely technical, technological, scientific innovation, transformation from analog to digital technology. It happened by historical coincidence to happen in the late 80s at the same time as in the Western world, deregulation was the mainstream idea. The telecom monopolies, national monopolies were deregulated, competition was open. This opened a totally new world. I've written the history of Nokia Corporation, and here you see the sales and profits of Nokia in the early 90s. It grew with this miracle of deregulated telecom tsunami, you could call it. But if you look closer to this development, you see a very tight regulation, standards. First in Nordic countries, Scandinavia, NMT, Nordic Mobile Telephone System, use standardized systems inside Nordic countries. Then came GSM, Memorandum of Understanding of how you roam over countries, what kind of technical standards you use. You created technically unified market, which has been followed by third generation standardization process, very demanding process combined of governments, big companies, producers, and now the big question is the fourth and fifth generation standardization. The idea that telecom revolution was the result and fruit of deregulation is only half true. The other half is that behind this miracle is a very, very difficult regulation process. My third point is about future. Finland, Estonia, several other countries in Europe are preparing for the 100 years anniversary of independence, national sovereignty, at the end of the First World War. To the left, you see the map of the Europe before the First World War. Era of empires, Russian Empire, Habsburg Empire, Ottoman Empire, even you could call German Empire, British Empire, others, even Swedish, remnants of Swedish Empire. Then suddenly, after the First World War, Europe of small states was created, 1922 to the right. Then came, as in the movie Star Wars, came the Imperial Strikes Back. Darth Vader in Stalin's phase took over the Eastern Europe. United States ruled over Western Europe, and then little by little this system changed. The whole idea, I think the biggest question of European Union, the future of European Union, is the question of future of small states. How do you combine necessary integration with all this regulation which is necessary for the freedoms and the national sovereignty, freedom of the people, freedom of the nations, feeling of the freedom, that you feel free, that you are in a free country, not part of the empire of the European Union. The balance between these two is there. In this last picture, I tried to emphasize the story by presenting the map of the European Union if Finland had not become independent and had stayed part of Sweden 1908. There are several people, at least in Finland, who think that Finland became independent only because we had some state-like autonomous institutions during the Russian time and built on those institutions the independent state later. So logically, if you believe in this theory, you would say that had we not got these autonomous institutions, we would never have become independent. I think independence of small states is based on nationalism. And nationalism is a very strong force, and we should not underestimate the force and idea of nationalism. And that's why the combination of integration, which is necessary, and national sovereignty and freedom of the people is the biggest regulation question of the future. Thank you.
Aitäh. And I would ask you also to stay here for a couple of minutes. First of all, I would like to ask from you as a historian, what do you presume if people in 50 years look back to 2015? What do they see? Do they see a start of an era of bureaucracy, or they see that finally people fought against the bureaucracy and started very strong deregulation?
I am not, and I have never been a Marxist in historical studies. But the more I study history, the more I believe that technological and economic issues shape societies. In technological progress, you could fairly safely say that you underestimate the changes in the long run, overestimate in the short run. So in 5 years' time, things are more or less like today, but in 50 years, very dramatic things happen. If you look 50 years back, nuclear energy, digital revolution, in medical research, very, very dramatic ideas nobody could have imagined 50 years ago. So my first point is that we don't know what happens in 50 years, and that's why basic scientific research is the number one we have to do, support. The other thing is that idea of individual freedom, not even freedom of nations, but the idea that individuals want to be free to move, to express themselves, to educate themselves, to vote with their feet, as they say. That's the primary force still that societies have to adapt to this basic need and will of people to be free. And that's why I totally agree with you that the support and defense of the basic freedoms is the most important ideology to keep people together.
I fully agree with your conclusion that it's a 3-point issue always, as Alex Stubb has demonstrated. I followed him in the European Parliament, and I found the same. It's very practical to make your speech based on 3 points. But I think you are very right, and this is a matter to be thought over, that it's not just deregulation or regulation. We need both. And to strike a meaningful and practical balance between the two. As you said, without a regulation, new regulation, there would have been no progress in Nokia and others. But the other point I think is most important for us, that is the future of small states and their national identity. We felt it here in Estonia, and I think in the Baltic states 12 years ago, when we had to decide whether to join the European Union or not. There were skeptical forces. But what is a problem today for center-right is just we see these so-called populists, anti-immigration politics as extremists, and center-right has refused to deal with them. But look, even the true Finns, now they came second in Finland. So this ignoring them and ignoring the fact that they express in a way a very profound worry about the future of nation state and national identity. I think, has it been our mistake to sort of demonize them? And what is going to be our answer? I think they have been expressing for years true worries, true problems. And just yesterday, there was a European summit on migration. No solutions, as far as I can understand, just a token solution, token demonstration of solidarity, but nothing else. But once again, there's a problem whether if hundreds of thousands of new migrants come to Europe, there are plans that every member state should contribute, take a part of them. And then what is going to be our answer? What is in the future to strike a meaningful balance between solidarity and national identity?
I think that during the past year, Mr. Putin has made a huge service to European Union by showing clearly for true Finns and other skeptics that staying alone in a small state is not a choice, that we have to be united. And in united, we have to find ways to combine national identity and integration, but to be alone with this neighbor is not a choice. Thank you.
Okay, aitäh.
Thank you for a most interesting speech. My name is Göran Lennmarker. I'm from Sweden, from the Moderate Party. Strong supporter of Pro Patria since 25 years, or 20 years perhaps, when it was founded. Could I first say, going back to your map of Europe that you made.
Could we have the map back?
Yes, exactly this one. First of all, EU is bigger than that. Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland are honorary members of EU in the sense they follow the rules. They have no influence, but they follow the rules. Norway is one of the biggest net contributor to the European Union, by the way. The best members of all, you know, they do as we say, but they have no influence. And I guess Britain, perhaps, or England someday might end up in the same position, not a formal member, but de facto member. But parallel to this process, we also have a decentralization process in Europe. First of all, moving things away from the public sector into the private sector when it comes to business, for example. Enormous change, as you say, over 50 years. A lot of things today are handled in the private sector. Telecoms, postal services, railways, a lot of things that we never thought of should be there. And also individual decision-making. You can choose your school in Sweden, or the parents perhaps do it when you are very young. You go to the hospital that you prefer, not the one that was there before, that you should go to your hospital, not someone else's hospital. So you have a parallel decentralization, also in the public sector. Some countries are decentralized enormously. Spain, for example, put out public decisions from Madrid out to the regions. Belgium is so decentralized so they can live without a central government for 18 months and nobody notices. And the society functions, which is rather interesting to see that we have these parallel processes of doing some things more together and other things we put down to the local level. I had a lunch with the Nobel Prize winners from Northern Ireland, and they said that the reason why the troubles in Northern Ireland, as they call it, I mean the civil war de facto, was partly because of the European Union that made Dublin and London less interesting. It was Brussels or Belfast, not Dublin or London that was important, and that helped the process of coming together in this communal strife. So I think it's very important to remember that we have decentralization and centralization at the same time. Could I end by saying the most important thing that happened last year? That was Maidan. Maidan was a really impressive thing. Imagine not only young and mostly young people sitting there in Maidan 24 hours a day in midwinter, protesting against a corrupt regime, a corrupt president. Enormously impressive. And I think that is the real thing for the future, much more important than Putin. Thank you.